I was both flattered and humbled when our post chaplain called me some 6 weeks ago and invited me to be one of the speakers at this very auspicious occasion. And I guess I probably had some of the same questions in my mind when Brother Davis spoke with me that you may have in your mind right now. The question was posed in one way by someone related to the publicity when they called and were reviewing my biographical notes, and they noticed that there was no real mention of civil rights activities. And in as nice a way as the question could be posed, I was asked, well, what is your civil rights background? On the edges of the comments and the discussion, I heard the question, what are you doing speaking here? And where I'm from in Macon, Georgia, one of my peers that I grew up with in high school would have probably put it like this. What's a nice southern white boy like you doing in a place like this? That's really the same kind of question I asked Chaplain Davis, why me? He said, Harvey, I want you to tell your story. I want you to tell something out of your life that communicates the power and the impact of what Martin Luther King Jr. had on a boy from the Deep South. Now, when I'm up here in New Jersey and I'm on the telephone, an occasion will come up where I'm talking with someone and they'll ask me, where are you from? They hear something on my accent, I guess, and I've gotten to the point I do not say Macon, Georgia anymore. I say Jersey City. And they say, really? And I say, no. But they're so overwhelmed with it, they continue on with thinking I'm from Jersey City. But folks, it's true. The question still persists. What is a nice southern white boy like me doing in a place like this? If you stay with me, I think you'll hear the answer. It was the fall of 1968 in the little town of Red Bank that's just up Highway 35. A little town with 15,000 people that in 1968 held in microcosm all of the problems of urban America, the demographics, the spread of people, the racial mix, the neighborhoods, the problems, they were there. Then that fall after school started, that fall after Martin Luther King was assassinated in the previous April. Black students took over the cafeteria. They demanded certain things from the administration of the school and the school system. They were expressing in their activities and in their anger the same kind of pain and defiance that was felt by blacks and many whites across this country. Part of their demands were that they wanted an observance to honor the memory of Dr. Martin Luther King. The school board and some esteemed citizens formed a committee to respond to these demands and these requests, and they planned an event to help honor Dr. King. They planned it for January in his birthday month, and there was a new film on Dr. King that was to be shown in the synagogue. There were going to be workshops and seminars for students and citizens about black activism and civil rights. There were awareness sessions that were sponsored by a newly elected black leader to Washington. But to culminate this event was going to be a Sunday afternoon concert and then a sermon in Tower Hill Church in which Daddy King was going to come and preach. There in Tower Hill, that white Parthenon of white Protestantism, sitting on the hill overlooking the city, there was a mass choir. 1,500 people packed the congregation. They sang, they swayed. Daddy King was introduced. And in his dark suit, in his white shirt, in his dark tie, with all of the dignity and the grace of the man of God, the white-haired saint mounted the pulpit. And he began with no diffidence. But he spoke powerfully and he said, I ain't angry at nobody. I hate nobody today. I didn't come here to judge anybody. And then Daddy King preached gospel. Daddy King preached gospel. He preached the love of God. He moved the folks. At the end of the gospel that he preached, he had an altar call, inviting people to make response to the demands of the love of God on their lives. Here, less than 1 year after his own son was killed by an assassin's bullet, Daddy King was proclaiming what was the very heart, what moved his son, Martin Jr. After the service, the rabbi from Red Bank, a very intelligent and highly educated and articulate man, took Lynn Rowell, who was then the pastor of the Red Bank Church, aside. He said, Lynn, I've got to ask you a question. I've never seen or heard anything like this. Do all preachers preach like that? And Lynn thought a minute and he said, I think I really need to talk just a little bit with you. They went over to Lynn's house and they stayed up till the wee hours of the morning talking about gospel, talking about the force of the love of God that empowered that one black family, many black families, white families, that love and that impelled them to move beyond the kind of bigotry and hatred and prejudice that wanted to wipe them aside and continue with the force and the power of love to demonstrate clearly that God was not satisfied with brother-hating brother and sister-hating brother, and that they were not going to be satisfied until the institutions of this land stood behind and were empowered by that same love. That rabbi that night began to discover that there was more, so much more to this movement, so much more to this stuff than just a groundswell of popular opinion. There was more to this civil rights movement, something more in it than the power and the articulation and the oratorical skill of Dr. King. That it was empowered by not just the sheer numbers of those who would march on Washington. It was not impelled by just the reasonableness of the claim that we needed to be civil with one another. It was empowered and sprang up in the context of the love of God. A new discovery. You see, reason can change a human mind. But only God and God's love can really change your human heart. You can legislate morality. You might wipe away the vestiges of institutionalized prejudice. But it's only God's love that can change a human heart. It's that same love that was alive in the heart of Martin Luther King that night in 1955 when he heard about his home having been bombed. He assured himself of the safety of his wife and his children and his wife and his baby, and then as he stepped outside, there was a growing crowd of angry blacks bent on retaliatory violence. It was the love of God that Martin shared with them, and he urged them to aggressively love their adversaries. And he spurred them to renew their commitment to meet violence with nonviolence. Listen to his words. We cannot solve this problem through retaliatory violence. We must meet violence with nonviolence. Remember the words of Jesus, he who lives by the sword shall die by the sword. We must love our white brothers no matter what they do to us. We must make them know that we love them. We must meet hate with love. I could not have said those words at that time. That same love that was alive in Martin's heart was alive in the heart of a man named Eddie. In the late 1960s, I had dropped out of the University of Georgia in my senior year. I was a pre-med student. I was in an international honors society for pre-med students. But my life was in shambles internally. I quit with no small stir for my family. And I spent a year traveling about the country, reorienting my values, reorienting my lifestyle, trying to discover what it meant for me as a new Christian believer to serve God. I ended up in Lexington, Kentucky. I had lost my wallet. I was unemployed. I had nothing except my good name, and you couldn't verify that. And a young man who coincidentally was a black man named Eddie befriended me. Eddie was a young theological student studying for the Episcopal ministry. I really liked him, but when we were together in public, I felt this strange kind of discomfort that was really a part of my background in the Deep South. And he asked me to go with him to Chicago. One of his very good friends was graduating from basic training at there's a naval school up there, Great Lakes Naval Station. And we went to Chicago. We drove most of the night, got there, stayed in a cheap hotel room, and in the morning got up to clean up to go to this big graduation ceremony. And as I looked in my kit bag, I discovered that I had forgotten my razor. Now, in this day and age, that's no real problem. You go grubby. Unless you're a soldier. And I felt very self-conscious, and Eddie heard me in the bathroom grumbling about something. He said, "What's wrong?" I said, "Well, I forgot my razor." And he said, "Here, you can use mine." Now, that may not seem like something to you, but I grew up in a white, middle-class, antiseptic background. My sister would go ballistic if she thought I'd used her hairbrush. And there was still that subtle, insidious kind of fear and paranoia that if you got too close to a black person, that whatever it was might rub off. And although my head was telling me it's okay, I felt very uncomfortable. He said, "Here, you can use my razor." And quickly my mind was spinning, well, I can take it. If I scald it long enough, if I cut myself, my hair won't go curly. And he reached in his kit bag and he handed me an electric razor. What to do? I prayed. See, I was a Christian, and I was learning, and I was new. And I prayed, and I said, "God, what should I do with this? I need to shave, and I can't scald this thing." And the Lord spoke to my heart, and he said, "Shave." And you know, that morning, I didn't get a very good shave, because the tears that cascaded down my cheeks obscured my face. But in the tears, there was a cleansing and a washing in which I could not see my face, but I could see the love of God. And at that moment, God burned indelibly on my mind the reality that there is no difference. There is no difference. That all of God's children, black and white and red and yellow, all of God's children, God's soul. And there was a healing that began to take place in my life because this young black student showed me love. And God used the love that Eddie showed me in that trip to Chicago and back to Lexington. God used that to work a miracle in my heart. So if you ask the question, what's a nice southern white boy like me doing in a place like that? I'm going to give you the answer real plain. Here's why I'm here this morning. I'm here to share with you that love. I'm here to let you know that it's God's love and not man's love and not man's legislation, but it's God's love that really changes human hearts. And I'm here to tell you the story of how God's love working through people changed me. And I'm here to challenge you this morning. I'm here to challenge you to let God's love work in your heart. We've got young black brothers and sisters who weren't even born when Martin Luther King died that are leaders in this army. The movement without the love of God is shallow. It's political. But read Martin Luther King. See what he said. You cannot extract the power of the movement from the message of God's love. And I'm here to do one other thing. I'm here this morning to say thank you. Publicly. Thank you, Eddie, for loving me in my prejudice. Thank you, Martin, for loving us out of our prejudice. And thank you, Lord, for sending us people like Eddie and like Martin Luther King Jr. Amen.